welcome to Let's Clone. My name is Stephen French, and today we are starting a Tetris tutorial. I guess I'm starting the Tetris tutorial today. You might start following a Tetris tutorial, but that's about enough of an introduction for that. Alright, so I have no idea how many parts this is going to be, but we're going to just kind of keep it going as we're going. First off, let's make a sprite that's going to hold our blocks. Now, we're not going to have the Tetris shapes in this part, and I kind of had some weird solutions. I'm not entirely, like, the code should be pretty simple. It should be easy to follow along with. I'm not 100% proud of how, like, creative I was with problem solving. I kind of used a couple different tactics, but it'll at least introduce us to a few different things that we could do in GameMaker, and a few different ways that we could solve it, and just kind of mash them all together, I guess. But it works. So we're going to add a sprite for the blocks. I will put a link for any of the assets in the description, and I will try to remember to do that every time. But for now, I just have somewhere on my desktop that is a background. How do I go back? Clone assets. Blocks. We're going to grab this guy. Whoops. We're not going to do that. Fuck. Edit. Let's get rid of that. We're going to do the same thing, but we're going to add from a strip. Could have created from a strip. I'm just going to add from a strip. So blocks. Use this guy. Banging. We have, what, 7? Yes, there's 7, all at 32. Good. That'll give us 32 different things. Excuse me. All of these tiles that I'm using are going to be 32 by 32. Feel welcome to like make them just squares, draw up your own things, find some cubes or tile sets elsewhere. I actually quite encourage that your project looks a little bit different than mine, because mine isn't going to be a clone on like an aesthetic sense to Tetris. It's more of a clone just on the core mechanics. So it's just good practice to, like, I don't know, play with shit. So play with it. If you want to use mine directly and verbatim, that is fine. I'm not against it at all. But you have the freedom and the encouragement to do everything else. But we're going to start with that. I think I got to make the room. We're actually going to, yeah, we'll make the room. So the room size will change when we get to some more polish elements. But right now we're going to have 320 by 640. That's just going to be, if we have this grid up, the Tetris map is typically, at least from all of the examples that I saw, 10 wide, 20 high. The room is only going to worry about that for now. My bad. We do need one more. Never mind. Never mind. I changed my mind. We don't need one more. At least not yet. We're going to come down to our macros. Now, this is kind of the part where if you decide to go with a different aesthetic, this is like the main thing that's going to change for you. So I'm going to do cell size, and you're going to make this the size of like whatever your grid shape is, or your sprite shape is. So I'm using 32 by 32. Most likely it'll just be easy to follow along with that. So use that. But the next one changes quite a bit. I have my overall map set up where like the grid that we're working with is going to be like laid into the map, and there's going to be like an X and a Y offset. For how I drew up the map, the X and the Y offset are both 32, so I can just use cell size as like that variable. But if you want your main screen to look different, if your offset's going to be a little bit different, you're going to want an X and a Y offset. I'm just going to do a Y offset so you can kind of see where to put those. Not a Y, I'm just going to do an offset. So I'm going to call this grid offset. We're not going to use this at all in this video, but I want the code to include it because it'll be utilized later. So grid offset for me is going to also equal 32. Real quick, coming up to here. That's all I had for that. I had a sprite for my border and my block. We're going to use the same sprite for both. And let's create a couple objects. So we're going to have an object border, which is, we're going to give it the block sprite, but we're not going to make it visible because those are just going to be used for the perimeters of the grid. You'll see why later on. That doesn't need any code. Yeah, we'll do it here. It doesn't make a difference. Doesn't make a difference. Initialize variables. We're just going to do an image speed is equal to 0, just because there are 7 images in there, and it's going to be invisible, so like we don't want it cycling. I don't know if it would cycle in the background, but more so because when we duplicate this, this will be object blocks. We can now delete that create event because it's going to carry it in from the other one. This one will be visible, and it will have the border as a parent. This is going to work well because we can check for collisions with the border, and it'll also read true for collisions with the other blocks. We're going to do something kind of silly here. The blocks that fall down the screen are going to be something else. We'll make them in another video. When they get to the bottom or when they get to a resting point in the grid, we're going to have a scan across our grid that will create this static block in its place. That was the best way that I could think of taking the shape, be it the square or the L or whatever shape of the Tetris piece, move it down because it needs to break apart because we can start like chopping away at it as we get rows completed. So you can't just have it like retain its full shape because then you'll delete the shape instead of just deleting one segment of it. So say we have the L that's made up of 4 squares, and it's going to drop as a single L. I'm going to do like that. Like here's the long part and the little piece. You rotate it. It's going to drop down, but then it'll create a block instance at every point. So that's how this is going to work when we get everything together. For now, we're just going to have the blocks. We're going to make them drop. We might get around to having a line clear, but we'll have the start of, you'll be able to see that it's going to turn into something. But if you watch any of the other videos, when I do a controller object or controller, object, something that isn't being played around with in the game, I usually like to have like its own naming scheme. Like I'm not going to call it an object because to me it's not an object of a controller, this just is a controller. We're going to have 2 of them in this game, only one today. I also, well, that will be invisible, need a sprite for this because we will be using collision detection on it, which is something I don't typically do, but it worked out pretty well. So, I'm sorry, I'm just reading my cheat sheet because I made that earlier this morning and I don't want to fuck anything up. But initialize, oops, controller variables. All right, we're going to be using a DS grid or a data structure grid. If you haven't used these before, it's kind of, it's a matrix. It's a 2-dimensional array, and we can use it to store values. We're also going to use it to like hold, well, I guess it'll also hold the position of the blocks that we create. It'll also store a number value that we can use to kind of check across the lines. You can make this game kind of almost entirely in a grid without using the weird shape shit that we're going to do in the next video. I'm kind of rambling. I'm sorry. It's going to be weird. Just follow along. It'll make sense after we go and as we kind of read through it. So we're going to make a grid is equal to data structure underscore grid. Oops. Create. We're going to give this a 10 by 20, which is just the same thing, the size of our map. All right, cool. We're going to have a couple variables for kind of getting the block to fall down the map. It's not super relevant in this part, but we're already here, so we may as well. So we're going to do fall fast is equal to 1. Fall normal is equal to 30. Feel free to change these variables as you wish. And fall delay is equal to fall fast. And this is going to happen inside of an alarm. So alarm 0 is equal to fall delay. I did not actually want to start off with fast. We're going to start off with fall normal. So every 30 frames, which would be 1 second, as our room is set up to be 30 frames a second, then we're going to call alarm 0. Now, that won't really do anything unless we actually create an alarm 0, so we should do that now. This is the, we're going to call it the block drop timer. That's what we're going to call this one. So in our alarm 0, the first thing we want to do is make sure that this happens every frame is equal to fall delay. So the first thing we do after we call this is we're going to give it a value so we can get it to call again. Actually, we'll comment reset alarm. And now we just need to drop the blocks. We're going to say if. Oh, I'm sorry. We're actually, this is a part that's going to change because we're going to be dropping the shapes. We're not going to be dropping the blocks, but in today's part, we don't have any shapes. So we're actually going to create this with the blocks and then go from there. I promise it'll make sense. I'm sorry that I'm all over the place today. With object blocks. How did I do that? Okay. If place meeting. So if we are not, where I keep losing my spot, I'm sorry. If place meeting is not x, y plus cell size, because we're going by 3232, object hitting another block, which again is going to read true for a block or for a border piece. So if there's nothing behind us, then we can just y plus equals cell size. So at any, for like by calling with object blocks, there's going to be a few different blocks on the screen. So it's going to run for each of the blocks. It'll draw this code one time. And for each of the blocks, it's going to check if the space beneath it is free. And if it is, it's going to drop it down. This would ruin the game if we left it in there later on, because there's like weird chances that pieces can kind of be floating in Tetris, where if you clear a line and then the next line only has one piece, but the one below the clear was empty, it's not going to fall into that hole, if that makes any sense. With this code, everything would just trickle down into any possible empty space beneath it, and it would just keep calling out like victory lines that we didn't actually deserve. So just keep that in mind. Remember that we will be coming back in here. We're going to be changing object blocks with object shapes, probably in tomorrow's video if I get around to making this tomorrow, if not in a day or two after that. But that is what we need to do there. We come down into our step event, and we're going to do our controller mechanics in our step event. I should have done something before. Yep, we're going to come into our script. So in all of my games, I kind of do the same thing for this part, where I do a script player input. Ooh, I usually get that capital done right. So then right here, 1, 2, 3, script player input. We're going to have, I guess we'll put these in here for now. We're not going to use them today. But key left is going to equal to keyboard. Check. Get this right. Oh. VK left. We're going to, I'm just going to copy paste it. So we're going to do a VK right, which will be for key R. And then these are going to be movement input. We're going to do drop speed input is going to be key D for down or for drop, however you want to think of it. Wow, chord. Come on, Steven, you're fucking up. Keyboard check pressed, VK underscore down. And we will have a rotation input, but again, we're not going to be using that today, but we'll put it in here anyways. This will be key, whoops, up is equal to keyboard check pressed virtual keyboard up. So left and right will move us left and right. Down is going to speed us up, that we will be using today. Up is going to be rotate. I just found that layout on some like browser versions of Tetris, and I played around with it, and it feels good, so we're sticking with that. Bang. Now we only need to do that because we're actually going to do the speeding up for the drop. So we're going to say if key down is ever pressed. I fucked up. Key down should not be check pressed. Now, if you're unaware, check pressed will read 1 at the instance that the key is pressed, but it will quickly turn to 0 in the next frame, even if you hold the key down. Keyboard check, as long as a button is pressed, it will retain that 1 value, and that's what we want for this. For the rotation, we want to rotate 1. For the left and right, we want to just shift over 1 space, so that'll be fine. But we're going to drop faster. What should we call this one? Speed. Ooh, speed up, block fall. I'll call it that. That's fine for me. So if it is pressed, we're going to say fall delay is equal to fall fast. Else, we're going to say fall delay is equal to fall normal. But then we want to, if I recall correctly, we're going to say if alarm at 0 is greater than fall delay, then we're going to set alarm 0 to fall delay. What that does is when I had not included this line of code the first time when I was making the game, fall delay is set to 30. Like at least originally fall delay is going to be 30 frames. So it's an entire second. So if it just dropped down and then you press 1, you've got an entire second before it gets called again and before we have an opportunity to change it. So I just want to do, if I press down, even if it's at 30 if it's gotten down to 5. Like, I don't want any delay to happen. I'm just going to force it to update with this new input, and then it's going to fall down quickly. So it gives us a more appropriate and like just responsive speed change. And that equals normal, and then click to spawn. Now this is going to be temporary code, because we're not going to keep this. This is only going to be so we can kind of play around with the concept and get this looking the way that we want it to, or I guess feeling the way that we want it to. So we're going to create a block when we click. So it's going to be if, excuse me, mouse, is it button check? Yeah. No, mouse, yeah, mouse check button pressed, mouse button left. So if the mouse is pressed, we're going to do an instance create. We're going to create a block, but we're going to create that at the mouse position, but we want this to be at a 32 by 32 position on the grid. We don't want it to be like halfway between two of the cells. So what we're going to do is, I think we can use just div. We need to take like whatever value the mouse X is and Y is at, we're going to divide that number by 30. We're going to drop the remainder, and then we're going to multiply it by 30. That's going to give us a like snap to grid for the placement. So we're going to say mouse X divided by cell size multiplied by cell size. Now, if I recall correctly, using the div function instead of like the slash for divide is going to truncate that remainder for us. If not, we would need to use something like floor and then do the calculation inside of that. So if this doesn't work, we'll come back. Mouse Y, we're going to do the same thing. Divided by cell size, multiplied by cell size. And then we're going to create an object of blocks. And I think that is good, but let's customize it a little bit. So we're going to do a variable, an instance of that block. We're going to create it, and then we're going to say instance.image index is equal to choose. You know what, we're not going to do choose. We're going to do a random number between 0 and instance dot. We're just going to choose because I don't remember what that one does. And we're not going to keep this code anyway, so I don't really care. 0, oopsies, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6, because we have 7 of them. Good. And we haven't run this game, so there could be bugs. We'll play around with that when we get there. But let's just kind of, in our head, think of what's going on. And actually, one more thing. I'm so sorry. Come into our backgrounds, create a background. We're going to call this background tile. This is just going to allow us to draw a grid. By default, it makes it 64, 64. So we're going to make a 32, 32. Zoom on in here. Pick any color you want. I'm going to pick this beautiful fucking gray. And you're just going to draw a square. I didn't mean to draw the white, so I'm just going to draw a hollow square. We're going to come into our room. Background, I'm going to give this a background, maybe this blue. Looks like a good blue. And then we're going to tile that square, just so we have a space so we can see for each one. Play this game, see what's going on, see how we're doing. Go on, all right. So when I click, as you can see, nothing happens because I'm pretty stupid sometimes, and I forgot to put our controller into the room. So controller, just put it there. It doesn't matter. We're not going to be able to see it anyways. Should just put it where we need to put it, but we'll get there later. What are you? Oh, my lantern. So come down in our controller, step event. I'm sorry. We called the key D, but we never put in the script. Script player input. Now we have access to key D. Let's see how many other errors I have. Hopefully, we'll create a block at a random color that'll just fall down the map, but we didn't put the borders in. I don't know if you caught on to that. So it's going to fall. If we hold down, it's going to fall much fucking worse. Fall fast is not said. Did I call it fall quick? Or did I just spell it wrong? Fall face. At least one of you saw that and just was waiting for how long it would take me to find such a stupid error. Let's try this again. See where else I've made a typo. Fortunately, GameMaker doesn't yell at me for having a lack of semicolons. All right, but here we're drawing shit and they're all falling, but they just keep going off the map. That was kind of deliberate. I just didn't do it yet and didn't need to do it yet. But we're going to come down into our objects. We're going to do a border. Now you might wonder why. Okay, I hate this part of GameMaker. When I scroll out, sometimes it'll look like like right here. If you guys can see that, like that looks like a half, like maybe 16 pixels on the side. But if you zoom in, it is 32, and it always goofs. But if you're wondering why the border can't just be a block object, or yeah, just another block object, I guess if we were just going to have the game in this window, we could do that and then tell the block that if it's outside of the screen to not move, and then it won't move, and also tell it to not get erased. But we're going to kind of impose this grid into a bigger screen so we can kind of have our GUI set up around it. And in that case, then it would be a little bit trickier. We'd have to be a little more precise. So in the game that I'd made originally for this, just for my proof of concept, I just gave this a new sprite image. We're just going to do it with that block because, I don't know, it's invisible. It doesn't make a difference anyways. Same thing with the, we need a collision space for the controller object. Same thing. Good. So now when we click, all these guys are going to move down. And what did you do? Why is that happening? Why is that happening? Okay, that was really dumb on my part. I was playing with a couple ideas trying to figure out where I fucked up, and I just added the sprite again just so we have a red tone to our border. I'm just going to leave it, so I'm putting that in the middle, dropping down one just because we're going to do it later, a little hint. I already put it in, I don't feel like deleting it. So keep it the same if you want. This wasn't the fix, this wasn't where I screwed up. Where I screwed up is I was comparing here for object blocks. Really stupid of me. Blocks is a child of borders. So if we check for collision with a border, it'll read true that we have a collision with blocks as well. But if we look for a collision with the child, it's not going to read true for the collision with the parent. So it went kind of in the wrong direction with that. That was my bad. This should be with border, and I actually haven't even tested it yet. I just thought it through, got pretty mad at myself for being so dumb, and then fix it. So this should work. Scroll that down a little bit. Let's see what happens when we get to the bottom. 1 Mississippi, and it stayed. Cool. So now if we hold down and it's just raining bricks, oopsies. Didn't mean to do that. Good. Holding down, clicking, now we're just spawning bricks galore. And that's actually pretty fun on its own. Alright guys, that is all that we're going to do today. It's pretty simple. We're not going to make this look much like Tetris just in today's video. We could if I did a really long part to it, but I do want to break this up into a bunch of little parts so we can better understand what's going on. So all that we've done here is we have the alarm that every 30 seconds, unless we're augmenting that speed, then it's going to check that the block has nothing beneath it and it's going to drop down. That functionality will work the same, it's just we're not going to be dropping the blocks, we're going to drop the shapes, but you'll understand the difference between those two tomorrow. And we're not detecting any collision we're not detecting when the rows are completed. But we will have those soon. In the next part, this will feel a lot more like Tetris, and then the part after that, it's just going to start polishing up, and it's going to be our own little clone of Tetris. Our own little clone was kind of fun to say. But that is all that we're doing for today. Thank you so much for following along. Hopefully you're learning something. Hopefully it's at least somehow amusing for you. Regardless, I'm going to keep making these because it's amusing for me. Have a nice time. Peace the fuck out.